We are live at the third annual CISO Ensemble, and we are delighted to talk security architecture, technical and business acumen, the CISO skill set of tomorrow, that balance. Our panel is very kindly moderated by Mike Thompson, Director of Information Security at Zen Internet. And on our panel, we are very pleased to welcome Stephanie Franklin Thomas, Chief Information Security Officer at ABM Industries, Ashley Pierre, Senior Security Architect at Deliveroo, Muhittin Hasancioglu, a former cybersecurity advisor formerly at Petronas, Luiz Vieira, Principal Audit Services Security Assurance at AWS, and David McKenzie, until very recently, Cybersecurity Operations Director, National Gas Transmission, and many other hats. I'm going to leave you in Mike's capable hands, but Mike, what are you going to be talking about?
Lots. I mean, I was in a work-related meeting for the whole of the morning. That only picks up at lunchtime this session, and I've been listening to quite a lot of the anatomical aspects of how it is to be a CISO, and the concepts of super architect. But what I'm going to talk about or ask about, I'm going to try and not do a lot of talking this time for a change, is to get the thoughts of the group around some of the more fundamental aspects of what it is to be a CISO. And what that looks like in the reality of the organization in the enterprise. So that's my bunch of questions. I appreciate. Thanks, Pelham, for doing the intros. It saves me a job. I just want to apologise to Mike for correcting him on how to pronounce Edinburgh in the last session, but it's Edinburgh, not Edinburgh. I was being cheeky, but I've got every reason, because as you can tell by my accent, I was born there. All right, which is true. So I want to welcome everybody in the room. I've got 4 questions to ask, and I'll try and get through as many as I can. I'm conscious we've got 40 minutes. Conscious we're also running over time a little bit. Dave, how you doing, man? Looks very smart, doesn't he? Dave and I go back a long way.
I was going to say, is that the first question, Mike? Because it
Dave,
doesn't really seem that open for the rest of the panel.
Not at all. Just a nod to the fact that Dave and I go back a very long time. We worked together for a lot of years. A great friend. So the first question I've got really is, what is a CISO? Right. So we've talked around things that are CISO related all day long, haven't we? But I want to ask, what is a CISO in the conscious mind of the people in the room? What is their scope of responsibility? And actually, more importantly, what is their scope of accountability? So I'm going to just clockwise it for the time being until people move in and back out and it rubbishes everything I'm trying to do. But I'll go to Luiz first. Please, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mike, for the question. And I think that we can think the CISO in 2 different kinds of approach, let's say that. Firstly, a person that is most related to the business. But secondly, I think also that is quite important for that professional to be able to think and also speak technically with his own peers and mates, and also to be able to translate those technicalities to the business area, because they need to be able to sell and make the board to buy the idea and the new investment for the information security area. And I think that that's the biggest challenge that we always facing along our careers, right?
Thank you very much indeed for that. So a lot of that is about that acting as that connect, isn't it, between the risk element of the business and the actual operational aspects of how the business does its stuff. Yeah, that's generally the point?
Yes, always trying to align the business needs and the technical needs as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. Thank you. Muhittin, please. You're muted, sir.
Now, do you hear me?
Perfect. Okay.
I think the CISO is a business leader who is accountable or responsible of protecting its business against the cyber threats as well as the business risk, so that it allows the business to grow and operate in a secured fashion. So in reality, it's no different than any other business leadership, which enables the business to grow and sustain its operation in a secure and an integrated manner, comply with the legal and regulatory requirements. That's simple as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, great. So in your view, Muhittin, the CISO has equitable standing at the very top of the organization, yeah?
Absolutely, and it needs to be on the table with the businesses as a trusted partner. And that's the uniqueness of the role.
Sure. Yep. Makes perfect sense. Dave, over to you.
I think we've said what we want the CISO to be. What the CISO actually is vastly different depending on the organization and the people sitting in that role. I know many very successful, very good CISOs that have trouble while working their laptop. But that doesn't mean they're not successful CISO in the role that they're in for that business, because they're a good communicator and they can move between, they can make sure that the people bringing them have the information right and that they can understand it and they can bring it into the rest of the business. But yeah, I think the problem is cybersecurity is still, in the grand scheme of things, a young field, and we still haven't nailed down what different job roles into that are, because the technology and everything moves so fast that yeah, it becomes a moving target. And right now, I think what we're saying here is that a good CISO and the one that we want and what we want to build is someone that straddles the cybersecurity risk and brings it into the business and can sit there and say, no, the business needs X, and we can translate that and we can get a strategy. They don't have to do it all themselves, but they do have to be responsible for the strategy to protect the business. But then, as we're now seeing more and more, they will likely end up being very accountable to the point of being dragged into court for that accountability. And so I think as time goes on, the CISO role is going to have to get more and more rigid, because ultimately we are now looking at if something goes wrong, we could be liable financially. We could go to prison technically, which is a terrifying concept. So I think the general security doesn't want to say no, they want to be a business enabler. I think we're going to start seeing security having to say no, because nobody really wants to take that risk that we're going to be doing it. So it's a strong advocate for the business, it's a strong advocate for the cyber strategy, and it's pulling all together. It's just been a good leader to make that happen.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave. And actually, we're now starting to see that make the mainstream news, aren't we? The accountability leading to things like convictions and prison time, restitution, having to give all you millions and millions of dollars back. Not something we're seeing so much in the UK at the moment, but certainly over in the US with some very recent marquee data incidents that have happened. I won't name the organizations, but we all know who they are. And we're seeing people put through the court process and ultimately paying quite severe penalties for it. Stephanie, I'd love to get your take.
Sure. So first, thank you for having me today. So when I think about what a CISO is, I really think about the fact that it's different for everyone, right? And I'm a person who sat in a couple of different CISO roles, and in every organization in the past, it's been very different. But as regulation comes into play and a lot of things that you guys are talking about, I think it's going to be more aligned to be more of a trusted business partner focused on risk and protection of the organization. But in the past, if an organization is not real mature, it's come in and, kick the bad guys out. I mean, that was like the baseline of what they wanted you to do, but you can't look at that anymore the same way. So depending upon where you are, the CISO role could be very different. It could be operational, could be just governance. It's just depends. Not the best answer, but probably the most accurate answer.
The it depends answer is often the most accurate answer, really.
Yeah.
In things I think we find. Ashley, to yourself.
I think most people have given their opinion on what a CISO is, and I think I agree with pretty much every single answer, to be honest with you. But yeah, I would definitely go on that. It depends. It also definitely depends on the organization type, what their risk appetite is, what the type of work that they do, the type of the country they're in, the type of clients they have. It really depends. It really depends. A CISO could be a glorified IT manager, or it could be a board representative. It's just like a huge spectrum. And like I really, some of the stuff that David was saying was really interesting around CISOs now having to be either financially or criminally liable for the things that they're doing in their organization, or the things that they don't do in an organization as well. I think that's some of the lessons that have been learned recently, is that if you ignore certain things or choose to ignore and pass over certain controls over either financial gain or business benefit, you know, that could bite you in the backside in the future.
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're already seeing that, Ashley, aren't we?
Mm.
And not quite hit the shores of the UK, really in Europe so far, but definitely over in the US, we're now starting to see that become materially problematic for executives in companies. And we see people thrown under the bus early doors in these scenarios, but it's actually ultimately creeping all the way back up to the board level. And it's the CEO, the CISO, and people like that are now facing the ultimate accountability for that kind of thing. And it will happen eventually. I think we're a bit away from it yet because we haven't got that regulation in the UK and that level of accountability established and enshrined in law yet. But it will come.
Mm.
We have plenty of new laws around cyber that have just come into play in the last 2 years. Thanks for that, folks. I want to get a group mind on this idea that a CISO is a luxury in an organization. So if you're in a larger organization or a mid to large sized organization, a CISO is a common role. It does exist. But the vast majority of organizations are not that big. The vast majority of organizations are 80% of organizations are actually small to mid-size. And they are the kind of wheels that power economies globally, right? So that's wherever you are. These little organizations are the organizations that are employing a few people, but they're turning money and they're feeding back into the economy and the GDPs of countries and so on and so forth. So the question really is, and I'll do the go around the room thing again. They can't afford a CISO. In many instances, they probably can't afford any kind of IT security function, an analyst even. So what they're going to do? What do they do? Who they're going to call? Yeah. So Luiz, over to you.
That's a really good question, and I did face many different situations where smaller companies, like for example, with 600 employees, they could afford a CISO, and they really need it at that point of time because we needed to manage different countries, right? While another company with 1,200 employees, they could also afford CISO, but they didn't have the maturity to handle a guy with that senior level. So all the decisions were still being taken by the CEO, for example, without involving the CISO. So it was a really interesting situation to see that. Okay, the founder is still taking care of all decisions, including cybersecurity, without involving the professional. So I think that we need to put over the table not only the size of the company, but also the maturity level about how they are handling all the security strategies for that company.
Luiz, that this is the role for the virtual CISO, or if I'm a small company, maybe I turn over a few $100,000 a year or whatever, and I've got 5 people that work for me, I'm still at risk in the same way anybody is at risk, from phishing attacks and ransomware and so on and so forth. They're all big risks that a bank faces as well as any other organization. Who am I going to speak to? Who should I pick up the phone and ring or send an email to get that level of support? Because I can go out of business like that.
Yeah, sometimes if the company has no maturity at all to afford a CISO at that point of time, or handle a CISO, probably will be a cybersecurity manager. That will be enough for them at that point of time to take care about all the security initiatives, probably under a CIO or a CTO. But obviously, from my perspective, the best strategy would be to have a CISO in place, because that professional, the senior professional, can not only think about the current initiatives, but like building a roadmap for the next 5 years and improve a lot the maturity level for the cybersecurity initiatives. So it depends always on the strategy that the company is thinking about it for the next years and the maturity level.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Muhittin, what are your thoughts?
I think basically the risk itself is there. Doesn't matter what size you are. Big size, the impact is big. Small size, impact still is big because the total revenue for that small business is small. I think it's not about the function, is it required or not? Is it how you're going to supply that function? And my view is that, I've been working in a Fortune 500 companies, which they can afford, as you say, $1 million CISO, but those mama papa companies or mid-sized companies, they can't. So I think the virtual CISO as a service becomes a very important component of support them. And that could be, easily one CISO can support 5 small companies. And the importance is to be able to provide the strategic input, to be able to provide a roadmap, to be able to make them understand cyber risk, understand how to mitigate those cyber risks. As a result, they can still take the accountability, even though it's a part-time role, part of that institution's protection. So it's about how you provide that support. I have an analogy of how they look at the market or the world. I put it as a triangle. Top tier is the tip of the iceberg is Fortune 500. Then the bigger subset is what they call middle range companies that you mentioned, which the subscribing services, CISO services, I think as well. But there's also a wider component, which is the consumer component. A lot of people do all their work through the digital platforms, banking, shopping, and so on. And they also need certain level of, maybe not CISO, but certain level of advisory support, maybe thousands of people looking for a solution to protect their domain and environments in how we package the solutions to them and how we package to our advice and office to them could be different. Very simple. As a consumer, I have VPN, I have, the virus management, I have ABCD. And why don't we package this as a solution to the market for millions to get to, rather than going for a $10 million solution to corporate? That's how the market works. So I think it's about how we supply those segments rather than that do they need it or not. In my view, there are options to meet that layer of the businesses to keep them safe and avoid the failure. And failure for them is a catastrophic, by the way. 500 Fortune 500 companies, they will always survive. But the level of companies that you mentioned, existing is at risk.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the conclusion I take from your point there, Muhittin, is that for the organisations that are not self-sufficient in the cyberspace, and that's that big chunk of 80% of businesses that I'm talking about, they need help, and that help can come from different places. It can come from the MSSP world.
Could be.
It can come from anywhere. But yeah, great points. Dave, what are your thoughts?
So, as much as I dislike disagreeing with people in a panel, because normally I'm quite pleasant and nice.
If we all agreed, Dave, it'd just be me here.
Yeah. But then you could start an argument in this room by yourself, Mike, so that'd be fine. But I think we need to be careful with the word accountability was used there when Muhittin was in, because if you've got a virtual CISO, the risk's still owned by the organization. You cannot outsource your risk. The risk still has to be owned by somebody in that organization, whoever's going to get hauled into court or whoever has to end up laying law or whatever. That risk still has to stay inside the organization. But I mean, yes, even last night I spoke to a law firm that has a significant amount of a monetary value in their clients, but they're tiny themselves, and they have a very small IT footprint and a very small security footprint, and they had absolutely no idea what to do with security. But they don't even need a virtual CISO at this point. At this point, they just need somebody that they can trust. And at that point, that was the actual thing that this client was coming to me, was that we went to a big supplier. They said, "You're too small for us. You can't really afford what we do. You don't need it. You need to go and speak to somebody smaller." And then they're left in this sea of 100,000 Karen from Facebook security experts that are littering the internet with clones of their own websites and stuff. And then they go, "I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know who to trust." And if you can't provide trust, then, well, that's what our business is. So I end up having like a long conversation saying, "Look, okay, what are you worried about?" And what ended up coming out, half of the stuff that she was worrying about, she didn't need to worry about. Some of the other stuff she wasn't worried about, she didn't need to worry about. And like, look, okay, this is fine. We can do some work to fix you and give you a strategy, but you don't need a virtual CISO that's going to charge you $1,000 a month to come in, because you're not at that stage. You really are that cyber manager sort of stage, but even then you don't have that space. I think just about every organization, when you get to a level of complexity, needs an accountant. You know, at some point you've got somebody just doing the bookkeeping, and then you have an accountant. And it's exactly the same in the cyberspace. There's a level of risk and accountabilities that need to happen, and a whole bunch of actions need to happen, and they need to happen properly by people that are, I want to say accredited, but that's a whole other argument. But it's essentially somebody that knows, that can be trusted to know what they're doing. And I think at that point, yes. So it's always going to be very difficult. I think size of company is a difficult one, because it's actually risk profile of company. Because you can have a pensions house that has 5 people in it, that has a massive risk profile because of X, Y, and Z, versus a charity that has thousands of people, but there's no tech involved. So they don't need a CISO, but the pensions people do, or they need to outsource it and get it in, sort of thing. So it becomes it's risk profile, not necessarily size. But yeah, for me, it's the people need a trusted advisor, whether that is officially a CISO or whether it's somebody with a slightly smaller job title. It doesn't really matter. It's that trusted advisor, and then being able to shepherd a small company all the way up through the different levels of risk that as they grow as an organization, they're going to need more and more. So it's the making sure that people are able to get to that advice and the right level of advice at the right time. And I don't think we've got a massively good handle on that, because most MSSPs are chasing the bigger and bigger companies because they want to grow. They've got a whole bunch of pressures on themselves. And so it's very difficult for those small companies to get what they need.
Yeah. Also, it's quite ironic, isn't it, that everything you said there is based around trust, building relationships, and that brings trust. But it's all the irony is, in fact, that we're also an industry that sells the concept of zero trust. But that's a different conversation entirely. Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
So I agree with the panelists. I mean, I like the idea of the triangle. I do agree with that. I also like the idea of thinking about it from a risk perspective. But I guess in my mind, I've always thought if you're a public company, you got to have a CISO, period, regardless of your size. If you're publicly traded anywhere, got to have it. If you have shareholders and you're responsible for them. If you are a private company, if you are technology enabled, meaning you are making a lot, actually all businesses should be technology enabled, but if you have a web presence or something like that, then I feel like you need to have, depending upon your revenue, you need to have a CISO, or you need to have that person, and it doesn't have to be a CISO title, who is guiding you around cyber and your cyber risk appetite and that kind of thing. I see so many companies. There is a company that was developed at a college that I went to, and they started baking cookies in a dorm. Now they deliver cookies all over town, but you procure your cookies through an online premise. So while they're still private, they're making millions just on cookies. They need to have some type of security person giving them, or some type of security entity giving them advice, because they're PCI, they're taking in information over the internet. So I guess where I'm standing is, if you don't have a company to procure that third-party service, whether it's someone who's taking in your PCI information and managing that, then there is a market to have. Maybe a doctor's office may need some type of cybersecurity guidance that's not at the level of a CISO. It may not even be the level of having someone on on staff full time, but you need to have some place to go. And I think a lot of big companies are beginning to recognize this, because I see commercials, with a business network. If you sign it with AT&T or Verizon, and you get this automatic business security type of thing coming. So big companies are beginning to think about it, but I think small companies need to think about it as well. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a lot of people who have accidental security, which is security that they think is there, that's not really secure at all.
Points, really good points. And again, it goes back to an earlier point about it's great if you've got the people, you've got the CISO in position, but if not, you need to reach out and you need to get that level of support, because nobody is immune to any. Nobody's immune.
Yeah.
Low hanging fruit, cliche as it is,
I
low hanging fruit. Sorry,
yeah.
Muhittin.
I think one thing is important from the discussion that so far before Ashley. I think you cannot be reactive, and it doesn't matter you call CISO, whatever you call. If it's after the event, you are gone. So the trusted partner service, but the need of that requirement is there, and it needs to be proactive. Especially all these businesses want to grow. When you grow in an environment and continuously attack surface changes, the methods changes, technologies changes, which requires that trusted individual, whatever we name it and brand it, is irrelevant. But what's needed is that body with that knowledge, that relationship is really essential. And I want to emphasize that.
Yeah, I think we get Muhittin into the dark waters of recruitment at this point, and how to pitch a role that's going to attract the right candidate into that role. And I think that's a conversation for next year's CISO ensemble, I think. But you're absolutely right. Ashley, what are your thoughts on this before we move on?
I'm going to say something really weird. If I talk too much on this topic, I feel like I'm just saying words that have already been said. I'm just going to repeat, basically go around the circle and repeat what everyone just said again. So I think what I was thinking about listening to everyone speak here is a lot of what we do in cybersecurity is tell each other what we all think, and we all think the industry should be like, and we go, yeah, that's cool. We all agree X, Y, and Z. But I also do think we should have people that don't sit in this industry, like Stephanie was saying. Her college sorry if you said friend, or the college business who are making cookies, getting someone like that in to go, you don't have a CISO, you might not have a security manager, but what does cybersecurity mean to you? And like, how would you fix a cybersecurity incident? What are the type of people that you think that you would need, or who would you lean upon for information and advice? Or are you going to ask ChatGPT, or are you going to Google it? Like I think those are the type of questions that we should be asking as cybersecurity professionals to non-cybersecurity people, to fully understand what they think cybersecurity is, to then provide onward services. That's the only point I have, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's fair. And I think we can sit in this room for the rest of the day and talk about threat profile as we perceive it. But that's us as security professionals, right? But if you run a car wash chain or a cake shop chain or a large conglomerate in a pharmaceutical context, we don't understand necessarily what those business profiles are and what their risk profiles look like without understanding them in the first place. So you're absolutely right. I think the term that you missed, and it's already been used earlier, is echo chamber, Ashley, because we do agree with each other all the time in this industry. What we don't seem to do is punch a hole in that out into the world, all that effectively at least, and make that difference in the way that we probably could do. Right, I'm conscious. I've no idea how much time we've got left, by the way, because the last guy ruined my timing. So I'm just going to keep going until Pelham appears. So the next question is about relationships between, let's assume you've got the CISO in play and that structure exists within the organization. Talk to me about the shared responsibility. So we talk about the accountability aspects of the CISO being in the line of fire, so to speak, and all that kind of stuff. But in my experience, security is a shared responsibility. It's everybody that's on the payroll is in one way or another somehow responsible for delivering security in your organization. I'm guessing because Pelham's now on the call, then my 4 questions are now going to be culled to this last question. So I'll blast around the room, and I'm going to just go clockwise again because somebody drops out and drop back in. So Ashley, back to you first of all. Let's do it.
Oh, that's a really hard question to answer. I think in an you use the word responsible rather than accountable. So you'd say ultimately the CISO is accountable for anything that happens inside the security organization, and everyone in the organization is responsible, in my mind, for making sure that organization is secure. The security team are responsible for making sure the controls are in place to make sure people work safely. But you've heard it all over the place. Everyone in the organization is responsible at some level. you give it the accountant example, like the accountant is responsible to make sure that they use a correct password, or they don't password share, or they don't use passwords from their Gmail and put it into their corporate devices, that type of thing. That's their responsibility to make sure that the credentials that they hold are held safely. But again, it's security's responsibility to make sure they've got the right technology in place. So again, it does depend, but responsibility for me, it goes from the top all the way down to the bottom of an organization. It just depends on who's accountable for each element of risk mitigation or transference, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, great stuff, Ashley. Thanks for that analysis. Dave, over to you. I said clockwise. Try to get through this.
It's not on the same on my screen, so it's mystery. I would question, actually, whether your average user is responsible for the security of the company. I think they have to follow the rules. They have to follow the acceptable use. All users. I know it's the flavor of the month that we all turn around and say that, you know, security is responsible. I question that. If random user in my organization clicks on a link, even though I told them they shouldn't click on the link, and they can then ransomware my entire company, I failed. My department failed. That putting any level of responsibility for something on the general public or the general populace of the company is incredibly dangerous. And I think if you have robust controls in the background, then you've got a good security team able to do it. Now, there's a whole argument about letting the security team get you to that place and get you to that maturity. But I am very wary about these campaigns that turn around and say security is responsibility for everyone, because every person on this call will click on a phishing link, and we are apparently all experts. Because phishing links are that good. And I can end up having a conversation with an AI, like I have absolutely no idea that person's not real, and end up clicking on a link. I might have a 9-month relationship with an AI going forward, and then eventually they send me a link and they finally get me. You are going to get me to click on a link. And if you're going to get me, a cybersecurity, in inverted commas, expert, then how does some random person working in accounting, how have they got a chance to be able to do that? So I know everybody should be careful and everybody should be responsible and things like that. You need to be really careful with turning around and saying that some random person sitting and working in HR or the janitor in a building is responsible for security, because I think if they can have that level of impact in an organization, then at that point we're letting them down. And yeah, so I'm just going to throw it out there that I dispute your premise.
I think I broadly agree, Dave. The only counter to your point I would have is that everybody is responsible for being responsible. And that is the fundamental point. It's acting responsible. And you actually answered that point early in your statement, which was following process. And that is a responsibility. So if the process exists and you follow it, you're acting responsibly. If you don't follow it, you're acting irresponsibly. And if that process happens to relate to a security control of some description and you don't follow it, then in my opinion, at least, you're not behaving responsibly. So maybe
at that point you're acting responsibility, but you're not responsible for security. And I think that's where my caveat comes in.
I think you're acting negligently at that point, I think, is the best way to put it from my point of view. But yeah, great. I'm sorry, Pelham, but you're gonna have to sit tight. We've got a few more people to talk to yet. Luiz, what you got to say?
Well, I do remember that in the old times you were always using the phrase that people are the weakest link of the chain, right, for cybersecurity. But nowadays, I think it's completely the opposite, right? People can become the strongest link of the chain. So I like this vision that cybersecurity is a cross domain. So we need to work with all the different areas inside of each company and organization. And people, they need to be accountable for each one of those acts. Like clicking in a malicious link, this is accountability, this is responsibility, right? About what they are doing wrong, or acting in a way that they should know that they shouldn't click on that malicious link. Is obviously is our responsibility to deliver the proper knowledge and share and teach them how to work and to act properly based on policies and procedures, security awareness programs, training, and so on. But even though they need to be accountable and responsible for following those rules, as David said, that we set, and also based on the knowledge that we did share with them. So I think that is two-way hands. In that situation, we are responsible, but everyone in the organization are also responsible, right? Because if someone just decide, okay, I found this this pen drive, drop it in the floor, so let's check what the pen drive has inside. So just plug in on the company laptop. This responsibility, right? So we should be able to address this situation as well.
Yeah, agree. And it fundamentally boils down to a people, process, and technology concept, the triad. We talk about it all the time. I always say people come first. I'll say that until my career ends. People come first because they're responsible for building things, dealing with customers, taking payments, etc. So yeah. Okay, Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
So this is interesting, and I'm going to keep it brief because I know we're short on time.
I'm
right?
getting the shepherd's crook now from preliminary.
Exactly. Maybe I'm just more hard fast. People are accountable. When you know better, you need to do better, period. And so I am kind of a mind at work, at home, that you're responsible for your actions, and I'm supposed to deliver to you knowledge that makes you knowledgeable on what to do, have policies make you knowledgeable on what to do, but you're responsible, and you could be accountable if you choose to ignore what we've told you to do. So for me, it's very clear. I mean, and then I also think of, responsibility in terms of, if you do something and it doesn't turn out the way that you expected it to, if you were responsible and tried to make the right decision, clicked on a phishing email, it's not like I'm going to go and say, okay, well, you're gone. No, we're responsible to kind of look at it in a certain way. You made a bad decision, doesn't mean you're a bad person, but we move on from there. But in my opinion, if you do something and you shouldn't have did it, then you're accountable for what happens with it. And I actually go out into the business, and if you want to do something that I've told you was risky, you can sign off on the risk. You can articulate the risk to me. You can agree that you're going to own it. And when and if something bad happens, I'm going to be back at your doorstep.
Yeah. Yep. I like that. That's more me. And finally, last but not least, Muhittin, what are your thoughts before we wrap?
Yeah, I think I'm close to Stephanie, what she said. My view is everybody has a role to play within this space, starting from the board. Board determines the risk appetite. They determine the programs. They support you and oversight. Then you look at the LOD1, management in control. They need to comply with the controls. Then you look at the cyber behaviors of your workforce. Now, by the way, this doesn't happen overnight. It requires a certain maturity. It requires a evergreening awareness, understanding. And it's not about punishment. It's about making people to take responsibility of protecting they protect their own personal account. They protect their own house. Why don't they protect the company's assets and so on, which provides the living for them? So I think now, however, I'm not as supportive of showing stick. It's rather you need to continuously handhold, support, and enhance those behaviors, which increases across the spectrum outside of the business environment, even the cyber awareness and understanding. When you drive a car, you comply with the road signs and the traffic. When you are against the company policies, against the compliance requirements on different things, you comply. If you don't, if you take a bribe, you're accountable. If you go to some funny trip with the suppliers, you are accountable. So cyber is no different, but I think its most important part is a continuous education, awareness, training, and hand-holding rather than punishing people. And that also brings the awareness of cyber across the world, across the population.
Team sport, Muhittin. It's a team sport, right? Sounds a bit pithy and cliche, but it is a collaborative effort. If you're going to succeed as a business, it requires everybody's input, doesn't it? Whatever the context. So I realise there are a lot of comments and probably a few questions in the chat, but I'm also conscious that Pelham needs to try and keep this thing on track. So what I would suggest anybody does with a question is get them into the Discord, which my friend Pelham will probably already has done, but I'm sure he'll share the link again. Just drop them into the Discord, and I'm sure there are people that are in there that will happily answer the question for you. I just want to thank the panel. Absolutely fantastic. Mike asking the hard questions. But we're all living this stuff, right? This is our daily bread and butter. But I want to thank you, appreciate your time, and I'll hand you back to Pelham. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to a great super panel. Lovely to have you on, and thanks, Mike, for being such a great moderator. I'll put you all back in the audience. Thank you, and see you very soon.